Hi, so my name is Lena Essling. I'm a curator here at Moderna Museet, and I've worked closely with Marina, with Lindsay, with Catrin, and many others here to realize this exhibition, and which is ending now. I'm so grateful that you've come here to join us for the finissage of this exhibition, which I think has been quite a journey for us all at the museum, and also, I know, quite a journey for Marina as well, making a big major retrospective of your work, going through all of your memories, all of your objects, all of your thoughts. We demand quite a bit as an institution when we ask an artist to make a retrospective with us, and it's been challenging and incredibly inspiring to work alongside Marina on this adventure. So this is an artist that has written art history and is still doing so in our new, most recent work. The exhibition will travel, so it ends here, but it moves on to Louisiana, Museum of Modern Art, which is a partner of ours. And it's also moving on to Oslo, to Henny Onstad, for those who want to see it there, and to Bundeskunsthalle in Bonn, and finally, most likely, to Firenze. So we're super happy that this will travel and live on and develop over time, because of course, everything that Marina touches changes, evolves, and it will be a pleasure to just follow how that will happen. Okay, so today we are quite a few people who want to say something about the exhibition, but mainly, I think, about a live layer in the exhibition, namely the live performances that have been going on in the exhibition, incredible work by incredible people that we have had the opportunity to work with and who've been trained by Lindsay, who is here today. We will also speak specifically about the big project in the church, the Cleaner, the public participatory project that we did in collaboration with Eric Ericsonhallen, the International Choir Center at Skeppsholmskyrkan here in the island. Okay, and with that, I would like to give the word to Catrin, who will present the panel. And soon we will also hear from Marina. But I have to say, she's very sorry. She will not be able to be live with us today. For different reasons, work overload and just technical difficulties, time differences. So in the end, we chose to do it so that she will give us a greeting to begin with. But over to Catrin.
Thank you very much, Lena, and I also warmly welcome you all here today. It's a pleasure being here and seeing you all here. And it has been a pleasure working with all these great people who are participating here in the audience and in our panel today. Some came also as visitors to the exhibition and to the piece that we created for the Eric Ericsson Hall, namely Helena Franzén, who you can see from your right side there. Helena is a dancer, choreographer. She has been working with dance choreography for more than 20 years and one of our most famous choreographer in Sweden. And she is working a lot with existential issues in her performances, in her dance creations. And she was one of the visitors, both in the Eric Ericsson Hall and also of the exhibition. So it will be very interesting to hear her points on re-performances and also the new piece in the Eric Ericsson Hall. Next to her is Danjel Andersson. He is the director of MDT. When he came there, it was mentioned Moderna Dansteatern, and he named it MDT to make a change. And he did make a change because he has been working very much internationally, inviting dance companies and dancers, choreographers from all over, and really made a change into the performance stage of the scene of Stockholm. And Danjel and the MDT also helped us a lot, finding the performers who have been working in this project. Thanks for that. Bosse Nilsson, he is a producer working for the Eric Ericsson Hall. He is also a singer, and he has been very helpful and a good collaborator in this project that we made in the Eric Ericsson Hall, because we simply made it happen together with them. Without them, it wouldn't have been there, simply as that. He was also singing, one of the singers in this core team in that artwork. So he has different experiences from the Eric Ericsonhallen. Hector Del Rio is sitting close to him. He is originally educated as an actor, and he has also been directing theater on the theater stages. He started his education in Mexico and moved to Sweden, where he also came to study. And now he is a visual performer doing performances. And he has been one of the performers in our team of 29 performers altogether. Malin Ståhl is a visual artist, and she has been working mainly, I'd say, not mainly, but a lot with performance. She is very much into how nature is affecting us and affecting her when she is doing her performances. And lately, she has been trying out performances without audience, only being there in the nature doing performances. Next to her is, and I would say, she also wrote an article for this paper about the experience in the Eric Ericsonhallen. So when you're leaving later on, there will be some samples of that you can, copies of it that you can pick up and bring with you. Lindsay Peisinger, we have doing a lot of work together here, Lindsay. You came here, I first met you in September, together with Marina and the rest of the crew who came then. And we started immediately to work together on trying to find performers, trying to work out what kind of re-performances would happen in the exhibition, and also planning the Eric Ericsonhallen event. It has been great. We'll get back to you. She's a choreographer originally and collaborating closely with Marina since 4 years. 7 years. And next to her is Katarina Henryson. She is a singer. She was one of the very important person in the Eric Ericsonhallen. She was working closely with Lindsay Peisinger to find out the methods of how the songs would work together in the Eric Ericsonhallen. And she is a founding member of the Real Group and Songs of the Moment Nordic. That is now a very experimental song group that she is working with. And next on the panel is Devin Zuber, who is our honored guest from San Francisco. He has also been working here at Stockholm University. He is a scholar. He is been doing American studies of religion and literature, and he's very interested in the spiritual aspects of Marina's work. So warmly welcome to all of you. And now let's see what Marina Abramović is saying to us.
Good morning, Stockholm. Good morning, everybody on this symposium. I'm using technology to communicate with you. I'm in New York, and I'm so sorry I could not be there today. But I'd just like to welcome everybody, all the people who participate, and all people who organize this incredible event. The cleaner, the perspective, the re-performer who done incredible work, and the facilitators who are also the re-performer, and everybody else. And I want to say hi to somebody who really done incredible work, Lindsay. Lindsay, good morning. So I understand that it's very important to talk about experience, and I hope that I will listen recording what you had to say. But doing performances and doing the long duration of work is truly transformative. And right now, when you went through the process and you've been exposed to so much audience and to so many reactions, emotional and any other ones, you understand what happened to you. So I hope that this symposium will have this really meaningful discussions and consultations and exchange of opinions. And I hope we can create some kind of book or something that we can include in and to learn from this experience for the other events. I stopped doing performances since 512 hours when I was completely involved in physically being present. And now I see more and more importance of community events, which large community goes through certain experience. And this community experience are really based for the personal change. And what we are doing here is to have this personal change available. So please take your time and really exchange your opinions and tell the story of your own experience. I wish you a great, great day. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marina Abramović. And we will have some pictures also on this screen to see some of the things that has been happening during these 3 months of experience with Marina's work. She was talking here in her hello to us about experiencing these durational performances and how it actually changes people. Lindsay, you have been working so closely to her for 7 years, and you organized the workshop Cleaning the House. That is a very essential part. Would you like to say some words about what that is actually?
Sure.
Thanks.
Hi, good morning. Or good afternoon, I guess. The Cleaning the House workshop is a workshop that Marina's started doing probably 35 years ago. It's a workshop that lasts between 3 and 6 days in nature, usually somewhere out in the countryside. And the participants, they don't eat and they don't speak for the duration of the workshop. And all day they do a series of long durational exercises. And the idea of this workshop is that it gives performers all of the tools that they need to be able to sustain performances over a period of months.
Yeah. And we were at Ekskär in the northern part of the archipelago, in Stockholm archipelago, for 6 days. And Malin and Hector, you were part of this workshop as well. Do you have any comments on how it was doing this workshop?
Yes. I think it was, for me, it was a fantastic experience. And I also think that, you say we don't speak, we don't eat, but we did drink tea and we had honey with our tea. So we weren't hungry, which I think is important for me. I think because we had no record of time at all, only the sun, and this was in November. The days passed, time passed slowly, in terms of what happened in my body, I think. And it was hard work to engage with these exercises. They were, I think maybe we did one exercise when we were looking at sheets of colored paper. There were sheets of, I think, A3 on the wall. And maybe this was the exercise that I found the most strenuous of them all, when we were just sitting in front of these sheets of paper, just looking at them, and then changing to a different color. And I had no experience. Nothing happened to me. Sometimes you can think that things happen to you and maybe you get some clarity or you understand something, and I saw nothing. And the colors turned gray. So the blue turned gray, the red turned gray. But that was one of the exercises. Then there were many, many others. We were walking backwards, looking in the mirror for several hours, and I had a great time doing that. I don't know, I just took the opportunity of, I'm very interested in nature and my body's relationship to nature, so I just took the opportunity to explore nature and, look around, walk around and look at everything, but from this backwards perspective. you want to say something, Hector?
Yes.
Hector, I would actually like to ask you something else. You told me that was one of the biggest experience for you doing the work.
Yes, the whole exhibition.
But you also did 2 re-performances in the exhibition.
Yes.
You did cleaning the mirror. You have done it maybe 9 times. It's 6 hours of cleaning a skeleton.
The first day was 7 hours.
Yeah. Exactly, and then you also did Art Must Be Beautiful, Artist Must Be Beautiful, when you're combing and brushing your hair for 1.5 hours, succeeded by other performers for 6 hours altogether. How has it been to be doing these re-performances in the exhibition?
Well, I think it was very important to have this cleaning the house in order to be able to do these performances. Because some people ask me, oh, but you are cleaning the skeleton for 6 hours, it's not hard. Well, I was counting rice for 7.5 hours, and it was much harder. So this is not so hard. But I think the experience of the workshop, when you go too much inside of you, listen to your silence, if you can listen to your silence, but you create a silence. And I think when you are performing, at least the cleaning the mirror, it comes a moment when this silence is there. So I can relate to that experience of the workshop and add to the new piece that, okay, I bring to the people that is looking this performance, this experience that we had in the cleaning the house. And this gives you freedom to just don't think and just be there. Because I think both performances, performance, it's about presence and here and now. But in these 2 re-performances, I have experienced it very strong, this. Because after 1 hour, when it's 6 hours, you lose track of time. So you don't know how long it's to the end. And I don't care. Maybe other care. I don't care. It's just being there, not worry for anything else, and do my task. And sometimes you forget about yourself and you are just the task. But sometimes you relate with some of the audience, because that's also very important. I think for the audience in performance, the time you give, it's what you get. Because I see people that they just cross the room, and I'm sure they don't get anything, but some people have been sitting 1 hour there, and I feel this connection, this exchange of energy. So it's an investment that the audience can make, and that me, as performer, want to participate with them. And it was the same in the church piece, because when each person was coming alone, and you felt the hand, it was really, really cold. So it's like, if they were there waiting 3 hours to be here, I have to give the best of me in this. So, well, I can talk more, but it's okay.
Thank you. Danjel, you were one of the visitors in the exhibition and also in the church. We'll talk more about the church later on, but I would like to ask you a little bit about, because we discussed already a little bit, but I want to know more. You are working on the stage and you do performances on the stage. And here we see performances being made in an exhibition. What is the big difference? How do you look upon this, the difference between these 2 experiences doing performances?
You have to, yes.
Yep. Yep.
Oh,
okay.
magic.
Now you made it sound like I make performances. I don't.
No.
Maybe I facilitate them more, right? And MDT is a stage, but we also work in different venues and do site-specific work. But of course, I mean, from my perspective, I mean, this is not only not a venue. This is also a museum, which is a quite a big difference from contemporary venue. I mean, what expectations you bring, also what machinery is around it. So of course, when you enter a space of an exhibition here, and when you enter, say, MDT, but could also be Veld or Dansens Hus or any of the other venues, I mean, you bring in other expectations. And of course, that's both interesting, but it's also something to consider. I mean, the problem is interesting, and it brings, from my perspective, more problems than investments. But they are interesting problems. But it has to be. They have to be considered quite carefully, I think, for it to work. And I think here, since this is not a situation where the audience, at least at first, were expecting live performances in it, because that's not what the room brings in it. I mean, we've done the opposite. So we've had performances in MDT where there's no performers, which brings the same attention span. I mean, people are expecting somebody to enter the stage, and if somebody doesn't, then of course there's an interruption in the communication, and that kind of recalibrates the audience. But here, of course, I was sitting looking at the mirror. Also, my initial reaction is just what Hector said, is that I want to sit there for a while. So as I sat there for a while watching Cleaning the Mirror, but then you also, one thing that you normally don't get in a performance, a stage setting, is you see other people enter the piece. I mean, because we all enter at the same time. And we sit there during the piece, and then we leave the piece. And you can also leave during the piece, but then that's a statement, you know? But here it's a durational, so you will have to leave the piece eventually, but there's also people entering the space of this communication that Hector was talking about, which is the liveness, right? The communication between people in the space. But this was also an experience that was interesting for me, that I mean, seeing people not expecting a live performance while they enter a space. I actually experienced that when a person, I mean, got spooked. I mean, of course, that's what it is. It's a person sitting there, not paying attention to you, and cleaning a skeleton. I mean, first association might not be an art piece, even though you're in an exhibition. So I saw spooked people coming in, which was half of my experience. That was live to me. But then you also have to be violent to the piece, from my perspective, which is something I think Marina has put in action, which you have to leave, or you have to put in the duration of the performance, which is very, very long. So you have to leave, which is a violent act, because there's a person doing a really, really concentrated act, and you're just stop paying attention to it. And from my perspective, the performance perspective, that's a violent act. That's like saying, I don't care anymore, which is in there, which makes I would say the audience as important as the art piece, or the audience interaction with the art piece as important as the art piece, which is something interesting in these spaces, because that's normally not the case. I'll stop talking there. Yeah.
And I think also it must be quite difficult to sit there for 6 hours, even if you said, Hector, that after 1 hour you lose the time and space in a way. But sitting there for 6 hours or doing something like that for 6 hours, it's emotionally very, very strong. And we have been talking a lot about emotions in this museum. Also the guides who have been showing the exhibitions, they have been talking about lots of emotions among the audience. People have been crying during guided tours even. So there are many emotions coming up in this exhibition. Helena, do you have anything to say about that specific thing? Talking about emotions and performances in the exhibition?
I attended more the church performance, so I saw one of the cleaning the mirror, and as Danjel was saying, I think it's one part of being involved is to be involved, that you are visible to the observers, you're visible to the audience, and I think that's the very powerful way of sharing, like you were saying about sharing a silence, that you are being visible, you're, I don't know how to say it in English, but you are making yourself available somehow. So it's very difficult not to take part of others' reactions, for sure. And I think that's something that since I'm working mostly on on venues, it's we don't really see the instant reactions in that sense. It can be for sure, but talking about emotions, I think that's something that is very something that you take with you after being involved, and it's very a physical experience. You cannot, just sit there with your mind to understand it with your mind. So it's a entity, and I think that's what I appreciate a lot with Marina's work.
Yeah, it's a bodily experience also for the audience,
Yeah.
definitely. Lindsay, do you want to comment on what you heard? You have been organizing and together with Lena collect or deciding what kind of works we were doing in the exhibition.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think, Lena, you had ideas about which works you wanted in the exhibition when we met. And then I feel like you should talk about this because you really kind of made that decision.
Well, I have to backtrack.
We wanted to have
ideas, and then we discussed, and also, of course, with Marina, who was here for several site visits. I mean, in the exhibition, it also has to do with space and flow of people, and what works end up next to each other, and a lot of both practical and very content oriented matters. But then you also brought with you so much experience doing these works, and we ended up, perhaps you can talk more about. With a few works that were really reflecting Marina on her own, both the very early works, which gives you a good idea of her break-off from Belgrade, her going into her own, but also with Cleaning the Mirror, something that is a solo work where she's... a lot of the works that have been done have been Ulla and Marina for many years, and then she started developing re-performances of the solo works as well. So they haven't been done so much.
Yeah, the Cleaning the Mirror has only been, this is the second venue where this has been done. That's a work that Marina made actually for video in England, and then I spoke to her about it last year when we were doing a big show in Greece, and I said, I think it would be really nice to show this, because there's another skeleton work called Nude with Skeleton that's been shown that was in the retrospective at MoMA, also in the retrospective at the Garage, and there are a few works in the skeleton works, and I just thought it would be nice to expose another one, so I made it into a durational live work that lasts between 6 and 8 hours. And so this is only the second place that we've ever done that work. And yeah, I think, as Lena said, it's really nice to look at Marina's solo works. We see so much of Marina and Ullai's relational works, especially in re-performance. Like at the retrospective at MoMA that had such a large number of re-performances, I think there were only 2 that were only Marina's works, and the other 3 or 4 were relational works with Ullai. And then... so we've shifted a little bit to showing more sort of beginning and end solo works of hers.
Thank you. Well, there are still re-performances going on this weekend, of course. Cleaning the Mirror is being done today, I think, by Elias Giro. Mm-hmm. And tomorrow as well by Lynn, I think.
No, she was yesterday.
She was yesterday. Mm-hmm. There are many of them.
Tina. It's Tina.
It's Tina. Tina, who is sitting here. And then also tomorrow also is Art Must Be Beautiful, Artist Must Be Beautiful. And yesterday we had Tyra Vigg, who was dancing for 5 hours, and Benjamin Quigley was drumming for 5 hours until the museum closed, and I guess they could have continued even longer. Marina did it until she collapsed, actually, when she did that performance. Lindsay, we will go on because we could continue discussing re-performances long time, but we would also like to talk about the piece in the church, or the Eric Ericsonhallen, which we should call it. And I would like you to say something about the documentary we will screen right after your presentation of it.
Okay. My presentation. So there we have about a 12-minute video clip of what happened in Eric Ericsonhallen. This was really a collective performance, I think, a public participatory work and a collective performance. We had 30 performers. All of the performers that were trained were part of the, I'm going to say the church, the ex-church. were part of this work. And we also had, it was a unique structure. Marina decided that she wanted to work with singing. She said, let's have singing throughout this. And so then we talked about that, and we thought having lots of choirs would be an interesting idea. And then I was thinking of how to create a vocal landscape that could last for 7 days, 8 hours a day. It's nothing that I've ever choreographed before. It's nothing that Marina's ever choreographed before. And we'll talk a bit more about that, I think, after this video. But what the work was a participatory work. We had, I think our capacity was around 200, how many people? 250 or 280 people. So for much of the week, we had about between 250 and 280 people in the space with us, plus the choirs, plus a core team of singers, plus all of the performers. So it was a lot of people, but a really amazing energy. And this video shows you a little bit of the preparatory phase when Marina and I were here in September, when we started to talk about things. It shows you a bit of the cleaning the house workshop footage of what the performers went through. It shows some rehearsals in the church when it was just singers and choirs coming in and some performers, and then it shows you a sort of larger section of what happened throughout the week.
All right, speak with Lindsay. Won't call Alison.
No, I mean talking about that we only see tomorrow facilities, but we don't have a meeting with these people because we meet with you.
Yeah.
So we don't.
With what? With Fastighetsverket, right? So, well, we're going to need a setup time. This doesn't include that, but we'll need 3 full days for choir rehearsal. At least 3 full days. I mean, because the thing is, the truth is, we don't know. These choirs are going to say, "Hey, we're available."
But what is this? Oh, this is piano organ. What's that?
Very slow as blood comes back into the body normally. Roll your body to one side. As little effort as possible. Because we're treating this like a stage now, but this is not a stage. This will be filled with people. Anyway, are you ready? Find a good position. Remember to breathe. You're old pros at this now, so I don't have to explain anything else. You can start.
Yes, you can see it was very emotional and very beautiful. Lena Essling, curator of the exhibition, will continue moderating from now, and we will talk more about the experience from the church or the Eric Ericsonhallen.
But first, I think I would like to hand over the word to Lindsay and Katarina for, right?
Yes.
For a closer introduction to the sort of behind the scenes of this work, which is quite complex and quite fascinating. Please.
When we started to put the work together, as I said, I was thinking, how do we make a piece that has a durational vocal piece in it? And I thought there were a few ways to do that, and then magically Katarina appeared in our lives, and she could tell you a bit more about how she put this core group of singers together. And
yeah, I mean, the idea was to have choirs come in and sing their normal repertoire for several reasons, because of course that would be the way that they would show the most personality and be able to give as much as possible emotionally, but it will also be very different energies. So to make the whole day be the durational experience, we would need some people that could take the energy from whatever was happening and keep the energy together with the performers, and then hand it over to the next choir, whatever that was going to be, which of course we sort of had an idea of. But so it was really important to have a group of singers, and I thought more precisely that they would have to be good improvisers, of course, and really good at also being artists in their own right, and have very little ego, so that they could also step out of that personality. But yeah, and I also thought it was really important that there would be some kind of mutual understanding among a few of this group. And so this song, so the Moment Nordic, is an improvisational group consisting of 7 people, and 5 of the people from that group was the core. And then I decided to ask some other fantastic singers that would also have these skills. But of course, this core team is coming from a vocal or choral tradition, in the sense that we know how to sing in harmony, but we also know how to improvise, how to sing songs, how to make soundscapes. So it's like a whole set of things that we were working with on the spot, because of course this could not be rehearsed.
yeah, and so basically what we did is we collected choirs. I think we collected somewhere between 30 and 35 choirs, each with a really different character, different numbers of people, and they were invited to come and sing, sometimes many times throughout the week. So they were sort of scheduled to come through during the day, and then this core group of singers really acted durationally in the same way that the performers acted durationally, to always bridge in and out of these choirs, but also to keep to hold that energetic container in that space throughout the entire day. And I think it was very interesting because the singers, at first were quite separate from the performers, but I think as the week went on, they understood how to work together to act as one force for the public that was coming in, and and to make all of the transitions and all of that stuff really seamless.
It was very experimental, I must say. The first day was kind of scary.
A little bit.
Yes, because of course, obviously, we couldn't rehearse this with the audience, and the impact of having these people come in, and all of a sudden we would be forming around 2 people that would be crying, in the middle of the circle, ooh, and like, what do we do? And and to have and Lindsay, of course, was observing this, like, oh no, now it's too much Woodstock. Oh, God, they're hugging, and now And it was really amazing to, in a very intuitive way, create the energy and go with what was happening, go against it, and also find the performers. And of course, we were not performers. We had not done the cleaning the house workshop. That is absolutely necessary if this ever happens again. But but it was a true learning experience from the singer's point of view, to see where we would lock into whatever the performers were doing at the same time as we were reading listening to the room. But I also wanted to say that it became evident quite early in the process, I would say in October, that is, for me, that's where we met the first time. And after the few of those meetings, it was like, shit, I think this artwork is starting now. Seeing the choirs, going to these rehearsal places that we went to with Marina was with us once, Catrin, you were also, and you did most of that work, and that was incredible to try to explain what we didn't know we were doing, but still set a vibe that you for sure knew, and come back 2 weeks later to some of these choirs and see what they had done, somewhere in Kärrtorp. So it was very abstract, that whole process, but also very powerful. And for me, coming from the choral world, I thought it was so interesting, because the communal work of singing, to put that into this work that you have already done with Marina, for a long time, the impact of singing together is such an own. It's a sonic room in itself, and what we do in that sonic room was, with people that the core team, we had not met them before, because the choirs came in throughout the week, and then all of a sudden we had this new sonic room to relate to as a communal effort, which was like overwhelming. And yeah, it was really incredible. We met with these choirs, and I think that, as Katarina just said, this work started months in advance, because you couldn't have had the collective force in that room if you hadn't had this preparatory piece of it, where these choirs were opening up their rehearsals to us, singing for us, allowing us to ask them to prepare something even. We were asking them to, because we wanted it to be durational without breaks, we asked choirs to consider their set in a different way. So they were, instead of singing a song and then stopping and then singing and then stopping, we asked them to figure out how to vocally bridge all of their pieces together, which is a challenge, especially when these choirs, the majority of them are amateur choirs. They only meet once a week, or sometimes once every 2 weeks. So they were using all of their rehearsal time to do this thing, to be part of this piece in Eric Ericsonhallen, and that was a really overwhelming show of sort of commitment and motivation, and I think that helped us also to hook into that same exact energy. And when they came, they were all enthusiastic and really excited, and I would say that the community building part of this work is even farther reaching than I thought it was when we started to think about it.
Thank you so much. It was absolutely fascinating following this work from my position of just running around trying to get the exhibition done, and just seeing how this spread like wildfire, or whatever, call it in English. It was these choirs that were contacted, and these singers, all these people that you were speaking to. Everyone got so involved and so engaged, and there was such energy, unstoppable energy. It was amazing to follow. Anyway, it's also, from a curatorial point of view, it's just so fascinating to see how Marina has worked with, she's worked with these projects, sometimes not realized in the very early work, which is public, but she wants to invite the audience or to the public to be co-writers of the work, let's say, to be co-authors, co-artists, and really be part of it. And it is amazing, I think, today that she's still so courageous to leave it so open as she did this time as well. Because she was not able to be here for everything, but she left much to you, but also had very specific ideas, but still left very much open, which I thought was very, very interesting to see. I wanted to ask you, Bosse, actually, as a representative of the church, let's say, or of the Eric Ericsson International Choir Center, which is such an important part of this. What was it like working in this very specific building, which is your home stage, let's say, in this project? What differed? What made it?
Well, I was partly producer of this, and I was also a singer in the core team, and I felt as a singer that this was a fantastic experience, because it wasn't a regular concert as you're used to. So So the difference between the audience and the singers kind of disappeared, and that was very, very interesting and a nice experience. And I also think that the difference between, as you've already said, I think the difference between us and the performers suddenly became smaller, and it was like a trip from the first day when we started at 2:00, the first day, and until you saw when we just made everybody leave at the last night. It was the last thing that happened in the film, and we really it was a kind of development for everybody, I think. So that was a huge experience that we now will try to bring what we experienced, try to make workshops for choirs in different parts of Sweden, in concerts, in art museums and places like that. So that's very interesting. And we have had so much input from people being in the audience, because they loved the hall, and people that are not so much interested in listening to choirs, they are overwhelmed by this experience. So we are. That's what one of our tasks is, to develop choral singing in Sweden and in the world, actually, as we are an international choral center. So this is we have learned so much that we will go on with in the future. So it's so interesting, and everybody knows where Eric Ericsonhallen is. And that's a good thing.
You really put it on the map with this project.
Yeah, and you too today.
Yeah, thank you. That was really a leap of faith, I think, both for the institution and the artist, to realize something so monumental and yet so fragile. It was really, I guess, maybe you should say something about that, Catrin.
The fragility.
Well, I guess the leap of faith of the incredible work behind this as well, because you also work with it as a producer.
Yeah, I can say some few words about that very shortly. Then there have been so many people involved. I mean, 29 performers, all these choirs, all the staff that were working on the queue. You know, we had Ettore Bellini, who is one of the hosts of the museum. He did an incredible work. He was like a performer himself out there. So it was so many things happening on so many levels in this huge project. And there were like, I don't know, several hundred people involved. So it's very difficult to say something in short words, but it was amazing.
Yeah, sorry to put that question to you just like that. I was thinking, Danjel.
Hello. No, I just saw a friend. So I'm here.
Good. No, I was thinking what Lindsay was saying about this is not a stage, she says during rehearsals. And I was thinking the way you work and the sort of almost research-like work you've done into post-dance together with the choreographers, sort of choreography in the extended form. Would you say something about your reading of this work or your experiences in relation to what you saw?
First of all, I mean, for me, the piece is also a lot about organizing bunches of people, more than, just what Marina wanted to stage. So the choreography of the audience is, like, for me, the most important part of the work, because there's so many people wanted to attend this piece, and most of the time was spent outside of the actual event in February. So I think, the closest to the early pieces by Marina was performed by the audience, like really standing out there in the cold for 2 hours without attending the workshop before. So this is, I think, I think this is showing a lot of respect to the art and to the artist. But I didn't see that really considered so much inside. So I mean, because I experienced stress in relation to that a lot of people were outside while I was inside. So my experience was a lot about, how long do I have to stay in here to be able to experience the piece? and still get out of here as soon as possible so somebody else don't have to stand out there in the cold. So it's a little bit around that stress that I didn't think was organized the way I would have organized it anyway. And maybe I would consider it a different way. I mean, the cueing, if that's not a part of the piece. So for me, that's a big part of the piece. And also the talking around the piece, because it really became this like thing that people talked about, like a hype, no? So, and for me, what people were talking about, what the newspaper were writing about, was the cue, actually, not about the silence and the warmth and the spirituality of the piece. Also, I had a second thing of bad luck in relation to it, from my perspective, was the first choir I heard was a gospel choir, like really religious music. So for me, it really became a religious piece in that sense, which I also understood quite soon that, I mean, when the second choir came in, was a random thing. No, but from my experience, also I knew a little bit about the art piece, of course, before, but just entering as an audience, for me that was, the randomness is also part of the braveness, but it's not for me associated to what Marina normally proposes. I see urgency, I see duration, but I don't see so much randomness. And for me, the choir part of it became this random thing that I think was, for her, the leap of faith. No, so believing in randomness from my perspective. But also, just very, very short, trying to, because I mean, I think these problems are interesting problems. I think also an institution like this should enter the space of those problems and also try to tackle them. So in that sense, I really praise the attempts made here. But this is a real performance, like it was made here for this site-specific site, and the re-performances have another set of problematics, no, and which I wish we had time to talk about, like the urgency, like the performers that with another body performing, and the context of a museum rather than the original context, and also how we address the performer in the art piece, so that they don't become an object rather than a performance with an urgency of their own. Because some of these people, or most of them that I know, are really fantastic artists in their own practices. So these things are like things I would love to talk about and put them next to each other, like from the live, and also what we're discussing today, the live part of the exhibition, or the retrospective exhibition, which is also very, very important, I think. It's a retrospective, and the choice of putting in a new work in a retrospective, which is interesting, because that's not normally like how it's done, right?
Well, if it's living artist who's still producing, it's not unheard of at all. No. We were just amazed that we could do it, that she would have the energy and time to do it. Yeah.
And also, I mean, her work has changed a lot over a long trajectory. So it's really, I mean, what they're doing is different things, but the core is still there, which is interesting. And the core for me is the relationship to the audience. Yeah. I'll stop there, I guess. Throw out a lot.
Thank you. So many things. We could have a number of seminars, and I hope we will.
Yeah.
Because all of those.
I think this is a very important part of this, and also what Marina proposed in the little speech she did. They really talk about this. I really think she's right.
Should turn it inside out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry for that. Yeah.
No, there's so many strands. Helena, I was thinking of your practice. You've done the dance piece that you worked with that I read about, which I thought was interesting in relation to this, with memory and what we leave behind.
Yeah.
Sorry, what was the name of the piece again?
What's left behind?
No, what's left behind. Quite simply.
Yeah.
Okay. But remembrance and our time on Earth, let's say. Mm-hmm. Did you bring any of that into your visit to the church? And also, I think you're one of the few on the panel who actually stood in the line, which is, according to Marina, truly part of the work, as you say.
Yeah, I stood in the line. I have also a lot of things that came to my mind when I was there. First of all, I think the spatial awareness is such an importance for me. What kind of space you are sharing with other human beings, and I had a question about being in a church, and it is a very strong impact to be there. I felt so, and then on top of that, it was fantastic and beautiful singing. That was also I felt a very what can I say, beautiful in the sense that not religious, but has a very strong impact in that sense as well. So I was thinking about creating, like Danjel was saying about the crave and the force and I don't know, the strong need. I was a bit surprised that it was such the atmosphere was not that in that sense, and also some questions about being led through the space. The package around it, it was a little bit limited in the sense of me being a part of a big experience. But meanwhile, I got to go into the sort of mood of everything, but it was a bit. I just didn't feel freedom in it somehow, sharing. So I was. It was like I was lining up for a package. I don't know what to say. But then afterwards, I could just see the sort of the rules around it and everything, and I just got to question a little bit about it. But what I'm working with, all this trying to find, because movement is you cannot grip. It disappears at the same second I perform it. Maybe that was, I'm not sure, I didn't read about what her, inner ideas was behind, specifically for this piece. But since it is about presence and sharing, I felt a little bit questions around the practicalities around it. Yeah.
I just want to say, I was in the queue also, but I just had to give up, and Catrin took me on, because I mean, this is also one thing when you're not physically able to stay in line as long, because I was in that long one, the last day, and I was standing for an hour, but I had a fever, so I couldn't be standing any longer, so I had to leave, and I guess a lot of people had to experience that. That just could not enter the space because of the long line.
But can I ask if it was decided from the very start that it was supposed to be in the church, or was that something that?
Yeah, well,
came?
we visited the church with
Yeah.
I visited with her and Giuliano, her studio manager, was here then in June, I think, and we visited with Anna, who's here. And Bosse, I'm not sure you were there then, but we just looked at the space. We've had a couple of things we collaborated on earlier, but it just struck me as something that would interest Marina, and it truly did. It was this, you have this unmilitarized military island, which is now an art site, and then you have this unchristened church, Orthodox, a round church, which is also very rare here. So the entire setting and the connotations behind that, and also in the middle of this capital, which is one bridge, and the setting was just amazing to her, I think, from the very outset. And then we had a long process, didn't we, Lindsay, on just understanding what would be done there. She looked at early work, and it just rolled on in dialogue with, not least Lindsay, how this would be set about. And to me, it's truly about, I mean, the vulnerability, which is always at the core of her work somehow, getting to that precious vulnerability and experiencing that with others and witnessing each other, as you put it sometimes. Would you like to comment on any of this, Lindsay? As the questions actually about the elements of the work.
Sure, a little bit, I guess. The way that the inside of the piece is structured, I mean, this is sort of a continuation of a research that we do in the Abramović method, which is also a really large public participatory experience. And in the case of the method, we have facilitators that facilitate the work and not performers, but in this case, it was a twofold purpose in a way. And so Marina and I were talking about what kind of thing we could do, and we thought about sort of continuing this research and then adding this other totally unknown component, which was a risk, which was the vocal component. And so we thought about, I mean, I always think about the kind of pillars of the work, of the method, and that is having a space that's a non-hierarchical space, not only within the people that are facilitating the room and working on it, but also among all of the members of the public. A non-discriminatory space, so it's open and available to everybody. And a space where people have freedom to make choices to a sort of large degree, in that if you want to stand in a queue, you can stand in a queue. And if you don't want to stand in a queue because you feel that that's not the way for you to enter or access something, then you don't stand in a queue. And that's kind of, I mean, Marina also talks about the queue as being sort of a waiting process, and a moment where when you commit to that queue, you sort of start to commit to the work at that moment also. And I think she also would say that you've waited in that queue for a long time, and then you've sort of earned the experience that you have on the inside. She always says the more time you give me, the better experience I'll give you back. And people are, so you're free to choose that, and then you're also free to choose once you're in the room if you want to stay there for 5 minutes or if you'd like to stay there for 5 hours. And what the performers do in this kind of space, or what they did, is the kind of leading, there is a limitation in that leading. There are very few actions that we choose to use because so many actions have so many connotations. You know, in the first day there was a lot more sort of hugging going on, which could feel really nice, but at the same time it crossed a limit where that space then became a space where people were confronted with some issues of intimacy, and that's not the idea of the space. The space isn't meant to confront people, and it's not meant to be a space that has psychology in it. We're offering an opportunity for people to hook into a communal energy and to have sort of an individual experience within a communal experience. And the way that I always think of it is, we want people to have a different experience there than they were having 5 minutes before. But I don't know what that experience is. It's not necessarily a good experience or a spiritual experience or an intimate experience, but it can be all of those things. Also, just to tell you this in case you don't know, before the public enters a space, what you saw them doing in one of the clips is that they were putting their cell phones and their watches and all their electronics and their belongings in like a vestiaire, how do you say, like a coat check space, so that when they entered the room they didn't have anything, so they have to have a first degree experience of this thing without the sort of common distractions. And I think that in and of itself, plus what performers do to engage people relationally in the space, I think it does have, you have a different experience than you were having 5 minutes before in the queue or an hour before in the subway or something like that.
The queue was a lot longer than 1 hour.
I know. Well, the first day, I think if you came in the first day, maybe you were lucky.
I was sick then, yeah.
Oh, shoot.
Ouch. Art hurts. Malin, Hector, I really want to hear from you, but I want to hear from Devin before then, because he's one of our speakers, and after that I'd like to hear from you about the church, and we open up for questions as well. So Devin, please.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. To vary the tempo, we've been talking here for a bit. I'm actually going to show some images during my talk. Unlike everyone on this panel, I did not get to experience the cleaner. I was here for the opening, but I had to return home to San Francisco. So I want to begin by responding to Marina's request of all the panelists, which we heard in her recorded reading to us, to locate our personal experience in her work. So I want to talk about how and why I've been moved as a participant in her artwork. But I also want to respond as a scholar and critic who thinks a lot about the relationship between the spiritual and the aesthetic. And that's one key or register we've heard raised here, and I think we can already notice sort of a problematic and not having the right language to address the affect this piece opened up. It wasn't religious, but what's the space beyond the but? So I first directly encountered the force of Marina's work in 2002 during the House with the Ocean View at the Sean Kelly Gallery in New York, which of course, the 3 rooms of which are here in the retrospective. And for 12 days, Marina fasted in these 3 chambers cantilevered off of the floor in the Sean Kelly Gallery. And as a New Yorker, the city was still very much shell-shocked from the after effects of September the 11th, its ongoing aftermath, and with the ruins of what had become known as Ground Zero transforming into a staging ground for nationalistic rallies that would soon support the invasion of Iraq. And some might recall that our then mayor of New York City, Rudy Giuliani, insisting that the most patriotic thing we could do as New Yorkers was to go back shopping to support the economy. This 12-day piece seemed a kind of radical intervention into urban space, a deliberate asceticism and a slowing down that opened up an assemblage of diverse people coming together. So in a sort of alternative public. Parallel to House with the Ocean View, Marina had a separate room containing her dream bed installation, where I and a crew of others had volunteered to dream for her during the show. I'm showing a picture of the dream bed installed at the Dream Hotel in Japan. I couldn't find a good image of the dream bed at the Sean Kelly Gallery. When I arrived for the first time to dream, I was honestly skeptical and a bit nervous. I was very stressed out with being a new teacher at a community college that was next door to the ruins of the World Trade Center, where a burnt smell still lingered in our hallways, an accurate reminder of how our classrooms had been used as a morgue for body parts in the weeks after 9/11. And here I was, running late from teaching a class, supposed to put on a purple robe that looked like a spacesuit, put my head onto a crystal block in a box, and in spite of all the many people milling around and taking pictures in this very public setting, I was supposed to sleep in the middle of the day. If I went in a skeptic, I came out a convert. Incredibly, I was out in an instant, and I slept so deeply with such vivid dreams that the gallery assistants at Sean Kelly had great trouble in rousing me out of the dream bed. But it was really the subsequent part of dream bed that most intrigued and moved me. After the experience of every dreamer, you were taken into a room with a large book where we were to write down what we had experienced. This creation of a collective public record of all these subjective interior and individual experiences was quite profound. I was struck at how something so ephemeral and interior, this inner space of my dreams, could yet be made something physically together with others. It was a kind of assembling that was not possible in New York at that moment, which was still reeling from the spectacular politicization of our grief. And in a way, I see this experience of the dream bed as anticipating a dynamic in Marina's later work, beginning with The Artist is Present, expanding with her work at the Serpentine in London, and very much part of the Cleaner here, where one's individual experience, whatever it may be, some might call it spiritual, some might call it emotional, some might call it something else, is nevertheless part of a larger belonging as Marina herself increasingly sort of dematerializes into the background and puts us, the public, center stage. It's hard to avoid the directly spiritual aims of this work, which is meant to, in Marina's words, to effect transformation with a higher self, I'm quoting her here, or energy exchanges between selves, an aesthetic experience that is to move us into a higher state of consciousness. And when we tend to respond to this as critics, we talk about emotions, but we don't talk about these other conceptual categories that she uses. The late great art historian Thomas McEvilley, who I think is one of the best writers on Marina's work, has noted how these sort of shamanic dimensions of her work continues an otherwise discredited association of art with religion. And I think The Cleaner is a wonderful moment to ask some of these questions, given the fact that it takes place in what was once a church. So it's not just any location, it's a very particular secularized location that embodies a process of disenchantment. And I think for those of us who talk about spirituality in regards to Marina's work, we really need to slow down and be precise and think about what we mean by this very nebulous, even obnoxiously vague word, which has so much cachet with sort of appropriation from the New Age, especially given the physicality of Marina's work. If you had time to watch the video prior to the exhibition or read some of her statements, Marina is very emphatic to discriminate. She dislikes religion as a body of institutional knowledge, but she's very into spirituality. So what does this mean for a secular space like the Eric Ericsonhallen? Were the 10 days of the cleaner a moment of re-enchantment? Was it affected by the varieties of choral music, the gospel songs that introduced a different dimension of experience? As a San Franciscan, I'm struck to recall the ways in which, when our own Modern Museum of Art reopened last year, they passed out questionnaires with a lot of different things they were asking of people. And one of the questions on those questionnaires was, do you consider looking at art in a museum to be a spiritual experience? Why? Which refracts a lot of the sociological data about the spiritual but not religious and the nuns in America. And by nuns, I don't mean Catholic sisters with hoods. I mean nuns in terms of people who choose no affiliation of any kind. So, in closing, I just was so struck in reading the reviews of the cleaner because I couldn't be here, and I paid attention to how German art history was responding to this, some of the reports in the Swedish media, the persistent parallels that were drawn to the German filmmaker Wim Wenders' 1987 piece Himmel über Berlin, or Wings of Desire, which might be familiar to some of you in this room, which is a very beautiful black and white movie that follows the simple engagements of angels interacting with the daily lives of people living in Berlin. And these are angels that aren't supernaturally other with wings, in spite of this picture of Bruno Ganz. They're very worldly with black leather jackets who touch figures and change the way their internal monologues are working. So why have critics persistently drawn this parallel with its work? And I'm not trying to reduce the cleaner to a film or suggest that the cleaner is derivative of this work. I think it's rather that both the movie and the cleaner have touched on something broader, maybe unnameable, something in our human experience that's also quite precarious in the coming together and assembling of these private selves in cities that are torn by violence. Whether it is the Berlin of the 1980s, which Wenders shows in his film, scarred by the trauma of World War II and the wall, or New York in the months following 9/11, or even here in Stockholm with what happened on April 7th on Drottninggatan. These aesthetic spaces of intentionally slowly becoming together with mindfulness, where time and space are altered, seem all the more precious and fragile in light of the current volatility of our global political climate. And I think they are things that, as critics, we must safeguard and cherish, regardless of whether one regards them as something spiritual or not. So, sorry for the mini seminar on Abramović. I'll end my comments there and see perhaps if my colleagues want to respond or engage more on this topic.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
That was super interesting. And could I turn directly to Hector and Malin, where I left you, and
yes.
Just also with the sort of your colleague Bruno Ganz there in the image. No, would you like to say something about the interaction as facilitators, as you were in the church, also, and the difference between working in the galleries and working in that situation?
Do you want to start?
Well, I can start. Yeah, it was, since I can compare the experience with the rep performances and this one, in the rep performances, we have an archive. We knew what we were going to do. In the church, we didn't know anything. And I think this creates a totally different experience and expectations as a performer And I remember the first day when Marina was there, and she was so nervous that, oh, please help me, I don't know how we're gonna do this. I was like, wow, my big idol, it's having this kind of struggles as I have when I create. I love that moment. And I want to link about this spirituality, because this is my diary of the whole Marina experience, and I wrote a word like post-ritual. I don't know if that exists. But because it's not religious, it's not even so spiritual, but it's a deeper experience that you have. That I don't, in my words, could be more like a shamanistic experience, more like another kind of thing. And since I was there all the time, you could really experience the energy changing in the room. It was very different from day to day. And I want to touch also this spiritual relation in the work, because I did the cleaning the mirror the day after the terrorist attack here, and for me the meaning of that day was completely different of all the other days when I was cleaning a skeleton and the people were passing, and I could feel that this was a new layer of meaning in this performance. And for me, I went also in, I don't know where, but the dirt were blood, and I was cleaning. So it was a very different trip. So how the reality also changed, the reality of outside the performance changed what I am doing there. So I think that is great could do a re-performance several times, because you can really change the performance. We got a mail from Marina that she said, well, it's important that you do the re-performance, but it's important that you put yourself in it, that you create your own work as well. So for me, it was like, oh, I have this opportunity of space to really explore the art of Marina in my own way as well. I don't know.
I think I would like to start by saying something about the space, the church, because I've also been thinking a lot about the location being a former church. And I have been thinking that Sweden is a very secularized country. We, as a general, maybe principle, generalizing, don't like religion, and especially maybe Christianity. But at the same time, in the Swedish society, there is an intense longing for spirituality and for, religion in some form. And I've been seeing this sometimes in art exhibitions. If there is some kind of performance that involves a ritual, the audience is extremely keen to participate, and participate in a way that is sort of this handing over of I don't know, agency, giving yourself to this thing that is happening. So I have just been thinking that maybe as a Swedish person I react on the choice of a church because of our history as a secularized country. On my experience as a performer in the cleaner, I think maybe, there are many things to think about the piece, but I think that maybe as a performer, while I was doing it as Hector, I wrote a diary, which has, part of it is printed in Danstidningen, so you can read it later, but I felt that I had to throw all my critical thinking over my shoulder and be in this work with myself and my body and my full presence. And it was meeting the visitors taking their ice cold hands. And then this moment of the transition from queuing, waiting, being really excited, entering the space, and what is going on in here, having absolutely no idea, because I mean anything can go on in there. There could also be like, you know, things happening. And this moment when which I experienced a number of times, when people stopped at the location, they closed their eyes, and I put my hands on them, and I could feel the breathing of these people, and it was quite shallow. And then after a little while, there was some kind of release, that this deep breath came, like, and then the breathing was slower and changed, and then I could leave the person and walk on. And I mean, this just happened so many times. It was a really common thing that happened, that really struck me as something really significant, and that there is such a need in people, that is such immense need in people for contact, and you know, contact that doesn't expect something in return.
Thank you so much. You really lost your footing in there. I was there for hours. I completely lost myself. But I also had, of course, that moment. First you feel super awkward, and then you just go into something much larger. At least I did. It was amazing. I think we need to open this up to the audience, because we're already 2:30. I think we're getting help now with microphones since we're recording this. We're super grateful if you would wait to get a microphone if you have a question or a comment. Sander,
oh boy.
Okay, maybe I will say this. My question to maybe for Catrin and Leslie. My group, we're singing like very different style from the other group that participate in this. And when you start and when you come and visit us, so we thought that we are really very different. Are you sure you want us to be part of this? And then when we start and we were there, and we really feel that is a huge, very incredible work, that our song, because we are singing with the music and we're singing really very different, so that you did very huge work, that our sing, it became just a part of all the show. So really, I want to understand how you understand our work, and then you match with the others. Thank you.
Yeah, I would like to start by saying something about singing in general, and I think it's no magic, but what happens when voices come together is something that is extremely unifying. So whatever genre, whatever style of music it is, does become secondary to the fact that you're using the voice. And that was, to me, so incredible when this whole work started, to realize that this is like a non-hierarchical piece in essence. So if this is what you experienced, I'm not surprised, I'm really happy, and I totally agree that that's what happened.
For me, no, I mean, when there was a gospel, these songs, there are so as this really deeply religious tradition, of course that triggers the intellect, and I also entered in that. So for me, it wasn't a communal thing. It was like Christianity, like thrown on the floor in a church.
Yes, I wanted to comment on that. Yeah. That was also really interesting if you look at the piece as a whole, because we were trying to not make a difference between the different styles. But of course, if you enter in a moment like that, then that would happen, and that was a risk-taking. And it was really interesting for us how to deal with that. And then you had this experience, and we decided that would be okay too.
But it's also, there really is an arc, I think, depending on how long you're there, because you might start with something like that, but then you realize that with the next choir, they're going to have a different personality, and it might be pop songs, and that's also going to lead you somewhere completely different had you entered on that.
This is also what happened. It changed after a while.
And so I think that in a sense, I wouldn't say that it's random, but it was, as Katarina is saying, there wasn't a hierarchy in sort of repertoire and form, and also it had grown in such an organic way. It was like this kind of web, and we sort of had to work with also scheduling how we could put people in, and there was always a chance that someone would begin with the gospel choir. There was always a chance that someone would begin with the Backstreet Boys, or I don't know, something like that, which was great, by the way. And so we sort of knew that, but I also thought that because this core team of singers was doing such a wonderful job at kind of what's the word, sort of recalibrating or restabilizing the space in a particular energy between each of these choirs, I sort of felt that it didn't necessarily, those connotations didn't necessarily have such a lasting effect if you were there for at least an arc of the piece. But yeah, for sure, it's a different experience if you come in and they're singing about Jesus, and if you come in and they're singing not about Jesus.
Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for the discussion. I just had a question, perhaps maybe more general for the panel, so it's up to everyone to answer, I guess. But we've talked a lot about space, perhaps, and specifically about events and time in relation to Marina's performances. But I was wondering more, perhaps, specifically on the notion of temporality that plays into these kind of performances. Maybe the kind of confrontation of different temporalities creates this situation of enchantment, or kind of this, I don't know, this kind of disruption of regular time that facilitates these kind of moments of enchantment. But I just want to specifically know if that is a topic that Marina works with, like temporality and such notions of it. Lindsay, maybe.
Yes, I think we talk mostly about like how so much of this work is ephemeral. I mean, how there's so much of it that happens that you can't hang on to, and of course you try to do that because you document things and you try to be able to reproduce things later. But what happens in a piece like this piece in the church is, sure, the question of temporality, and the question of something being ephemeral, and the idea that something can exist in a moment because of all of these different pieces being in the right place at the right time. That's so strong in this work. And then the next moment it shifts, and then there's other pieces that are in the right place at the right time. And then, and it's kind of what makes it so magical. I mean, as I was watching this video, one thing I was thinking when I was watching it is I thought, and I don't really think about this so much inside of these works, but there's actually so much joy in that. There's a lot of joy in this. And then what is joy? What's the visceral reaction that you have in these moments? That's sort of immediate, that, you know, and what are the pieces that allow you to have those reactions? Is it because it's a space of mutual vulnerability? I think that's a huge part of it, this mutual vulnerability between performers and singers and public, and then also the switching of roles, that there's something quite fluid in that, and that it all lasts just for a moment and then shifts again. So I think that we're always really aware of how temporary something is or how ephemeral something is, and also how, depending on the duration of your stay or your participation in that thing, how often it can change. And so I think what we sort of try to do is, because that can be something that's sort of chaotic, is we try to create an energetic container that's steady, no matter what is fluctuating inside of it. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Could I briefly add on to that? I think this is where Marina's use of different religious traditions is interesting as a resource for alternative temporalities. And this retrospective wonderfully exemplifies this in her private archaeology, which was just fantastic to spend time looking at those drawers. And there's a lot of sort of alternative temporalities that you can see, and just even the title of that work, that it's an archaeology, and yet it's also about the future at the same time, I think shows that.
Yeah, I wanted to add regarding to time, because we also deal with speed, and that changed time. 1 hour is not an hour when you are in a different speed. And for me, it was a very strong experience. And maybe one of the strongest exercises we did is this slow walking, because each morning I was slow walking to the church from Grand Hotel, and the people were like maybe wondering what I was, but it gives another experience of the space if you change the speed. It's not only that, okay, it will take 20 minutes or half hour. So it changed the perception in time, and time is not 60 seconds, 1 minute. It changed. The concept of time changed when you change the speed. So these very long days of 8 hours in the room, it's completely different. So I think it's very important how we can learn to deal with time, and it's useful for our society. And I think Marina stressed that in her practices.
Yeah, and also it was very violent in the cleaner, the performance, where the time was so present in the queue, because everybody was. And also by the museum, we were because we were so far away from getting in. They kept on saying how long time we would have to wait, and they always added time, so it was longer and longer the more you waited. So also the time was. It was almost like waiting for a bus, right? It says 3 minutes, but it's never 3 minutes. But here was hours, no? And then when you went in, you left all the time. So first the time was the most present thing, and then you went into the situation, and then you left your watches and your phones, and you don't have access to time anymore. And you're in and somebody today, I think 3 people asked, how long was I inside? And I of course, I didn't know. Also, when I went out, I forgot to look at because time wasn't important anymore. I don't think I was there too long, since I was stressed about all the other people outside of the church. But maybe I was there for an hour. But I don't know. It could have also been 15 minutes or maybe 2 hours. I don't know.
Talking about time, I also had this experience of when I was leaving and to get my technical stuff, the cell phone and everything, I just felt so it felt so wrong to take, like, I just didn't want to, the feeling of don't disturb, because for sure you got into this quietness and you don't want to disturb it, and so it took me quite a long time before I took up my stuff, and it felt really good. Like a long effect of actually leaving the space. It actually had, a time impact on me even afterwards. So that was great, actually.
Thank you so very much, everyone. I don't know if you hear me now. Yes, thanks very much. We have time issues right now too. Oh, we have someone here? Oh.
It's just a comment.
Okay,
That's
please.
actually me on the picture there now.
Good timing.
I was there 4 times actually.
Okay, so you really spent
about 20 hours inside. I wasn't stressed at all. And it was a fantastic experience for me. Both an art experience and sound experience. And I had a physical reaction to many of the choirs. It was like just pulsating, and I had like goosebumps in my brain. I felt fantastic, and I was so grateful for all the performers, how they I just let go and I let them. I was closing my eyes and I was led around with my eyes closed, and I was so grateful they took care of me in that way. And I went to a restaurant 2 weeks ago, and at that restaurant they feed you food. They just say, open your mouth, and you give you a spoon or something. And it was almost I was doing the same thing there. I just let it go, and it was a really nice experience. Just let myself to someone else's. They took care of me. So I just want to say I'm very thankful for this experience. I'm really grateful that I could have this experience. And actually, I started to like choir music. I never thought that, but for me,
wow,
it's really
great. Thank you very much.
Experience.
Thanks for this comment. We do have time issues because the core team of Katarina and Lindsay, they have already started warming up the room upstairs where Marina's work meet with early modernism. It's free entrance, so please welcome there. We continue the whole day. And there will be 3 choirs with us today, Perunika and Format and Kompiskören, and among them a lot of professional singers binding the work together. So please welcome there and join us also tonight in the Moderna bar. We will be celebrating whole night.
Okay, thank you.